Jury service. Good evening, everyone. I'm Felix Vega, and welcome to On the Docket. Thanks so much for joining us tonight. We have another great show lined up, definitely. It's been a busy couple of news days, We have a lot to cover tonight with our guests, including Judge Greg Holder, who's here with me in the studio. Then in our second half hour on our sports page, we mentioned the disturbing child abuse scandal unfolding at Penn State. And it's been the undoing of a storied career for head coach Joe Paterno. As we learned this morning, Paterno will retire at the end of this season. We have the grand jury's report actually on what happened, and we'll discuss that more. And the NFL blackout rule. Could it finally end, at least here in Florida? Last Friday, State Senator Mike Fasano introduced a law with an interesting new way around the blackout rule for the Bucks, Jaguars, and the Dolphins. And would it result in a payout to our NFL cities in Florida? We'll take a look. And in politics, Clarence Thomas, Bill Clinton, and Herman Cain, all in the same category? Herman Cain still neck and neck with Mitt Romney in the latest NBC News Wall Street Journal poll as of this past Sunday. Then, on Monday, graphic new claims of sexual harassment from yet another woman who goes public, this time in New York. How did Cain fire back? How did some of you vote in our Facebook poll? We'll have it all, including new allegations that surfaced today about another accuser. And we lawyers say this at least once a week when we're in court. You can't make this stuff up. That's the name of our weekly recap of the odds and ends of the legal world. Tonight, a woman threatens to blow up some planes. Yes, you heard me right. A modern-day Doogie Howser, kinda. And a crime victim accused of murder and some other stuff. My friend Tim Owens is back on the docket to talk about it all. But first, we want to get caught up on today's top news stories on the docket. It's been a busy news day, as I told you earlier. And this morning, after just 10 hours of total deliberations, actually this happened on Monday, a California jury returned a guilty verdict against Dr. Conrad Murray, the man accused of involuntary manslaughter in the death of Michael Jackson. With that guilty verdict, Judge Michael Pastor took Murray into custody and set a sentencing date of November 29th. Hundreds gathered outside the courthouse claimed justice for Jackson and his entire family, while jurors later told the press that but for Conrad Murray, Jackson would still be alive. Jackson, of course, died after being administered a lethal dose of the surgical sedative propofol by Dr. Murray at Jackson's home. Murray's medical license was suspended in October, and he now faces up to 4 years in prison. And more breaking news to bring you tonight. A jury has also convicted former County Commissioner Kevin White on bribery and wire fraud charges, guilty on 7 of the 10 counts he was charged with. According to TBO.com this afternoon, the jury returned their verdict this morning at approximately 11:38 after just 6.5 hours deliberating Tuesday afternoon and into this morning. White's attorney Grady Irvin argued that the alleged bribe caught on tape, now that's so infamously seen on video, where White is seen receiving $5,000 in cash from an FBI informant in exchange for placing a tow company on the city's valuable tow truck rotation, was a campaign contribution. Irvin also painted White as a victim of his now deceased father's criminal activities, but jurors found White not guilty of the counts involving payment to his father. White will remain free on bail pending his sentencing on February 27th in federal court. This is the second time White has gambled his fate before a jury and lost. 2009, White stood trial on sexual harassment charges and was found guilty in that civil suit. White now faces prison time under the federal sentencing guidelines, and it's another story we will be following on the docket. And finally, in our news block, the government took over the airways today at 2 p.m. on TV and radio for real. We are all used to the local versions of the famous test of the emergency broadcast system. Well, today's test was a nationwide test conducted by the Department of Homeland Security. It's designed to expose any breaks in the alert system should a nationwide or regional catastrophe occur, such as another terror attack, massive flood, or other natural disasters. I know a lot of our local stations took great pains to let everyone know that, as well as stations across the country as well. Moving on into financial news today, the markets here in the U.S. took a beating, down over 3%. The Dow Jones Industrial Average down 389 points. NASDAQ was down 105. Oil prices settled in around $96 a barrel. Overseas, the Nikkei average in Japan was up 99 points. They're settling in around the 9,000 mark finally again. Unemployment in the U.S. still stands at 9%. And in our market takeaways, we talked about this last week. We faced our own debt crisis in the U.S. this summer, and the one in Greece has reached the breaking point yet again. In fact, word came on Sunday that the Greek Prime Minister, George Papandreou, agreed to step down and allow a coalition government to be formed, all to secure the Greek economy and get bailout support from the rest of Europe. And Tuesday, the same fate met Italian Prime Minister Silvio Berlusconi as he agreed to step down for similar reasons. Imagine that happening here in the United States this summer. President Obama, House Speaker John Boehner, Senate Majority Leader Harry Reid forced to step down and a coalition government formed. Luckily, we didn't reach that breaking point, but it makes you wonder if it's ever going to be a possibility. And your weather update tonight on the docket. It's going to be down into the lower 60s tonight in most areas. Tomorrow, another dry day ahead of another cold front, much like last weekend. Lows Friday and Saturday morning will be in the low 50s, with highs in the 70s and sunny throughout the weekend. I know I'm looking forward to going to Epcot's Food and Wine Festival this weekend on Friday, where it should be cool and dry as well. You're caught up and up to date on the latest news, and that brings us to our very special guest tonight here on the docket. Judge Greg Holder is here. And of course, we want to hear from you. Post a message on our Facebook fan page at facebook.com/onthedocket. You can follow me on Twitter at felixveganews or send me an email at felixveganews@aol.com. And we will remind you, you're listening live to On the Docket on hawkradio.com and WMNF Tampa 88.5 HD4. And as I said, we are privileged tonight to have a very special guest, Judge Greg Holder. Judge Holder, good evening.
Well, good evening, Felix.
And we're so glad you're here. You were actually front and center in the news for the past month or so, especially last Friday. We're talking, of course, about all those people that didn't show up for jury duty. Judge Holder, just so you know, has been on the bench here in Hillsborough County for the past 17 years. And you actually were a military judge for how long?
8 years.
And so you've had a long and storied career in the judiciary. He spent the past 4 years as a felony criminal court judge here in Hillsborough County. Full disclosure to all our viewers, I'm actually in front of Judge Holder on a daily basis as a prosecutor in Tampa, but had nothing to do with the juror summons issue that happened. And this started, as you may remember, back one seemingly quiet Monday morning in the news world. Judge Holder, on October 3rd, we waited over 3 hours just to get 22 jurors to get one trial underway. There was no real excuse for the delay, despite a high number of jurors being needed in other courtrooms. When he dug deeper, Judge Holder was told that 387 jurors were no-shows that morning. And that's when he decided to give Hillsborough County what have some called a well-overdue civic lesson. And Judge Holder, let me start by asking you, and you can explain to our listeners, what exactly was the situation on October 3rd that happened in the courthouse?
Well, on that particular day, it was a normal Monday, and of course jurors are summoned each and every Monday, absent holidays, when we revert to a Tuesday summons. But that Monday, October 3, like any other Monday, we summoned, almost 1,000. I can't remember the exact number. But again, 40% of those persons decided not to attend, not to show up, and not to participate in this constitutional process.
And on an average day, I know you ran some of the numbers and also talked with the clerk's office and also jury services. How many people on average don't show up for jury duty every week here in Hillsborough?
Well, that particular day, it was approximately 40%. The normal no-show rate is an unacceptable 25%. 1 in 4 just refuse, for whatever reason, to show up. Those are excluding the ones that have obtained a valid excuse from a judge of this court.
And when you talk about when people get the summons in the mail, I know you had one on the bench with you on Friday when you actually brought the jurors back in. Explain to us, what exactly do jurors need to do if they need to get out of jury duty, essentially?
Well, the jury summons indicates very clearly that the person being summoned can complete the section if requesting an exemption. These exemptions include the optional exemptions: an expectant mother or a mother breastfeeding a child under 2 years of age, a parent not employed full-time who has custody of a child under the age of 6, a non-healthcare professional caring for someone with a mental or physical disability, a full-time law enforcement officer or law enforcement investigative personnel, or a person 70 years of age or older requesting permanent excusal. And then there's the other block. And
the other category could be anything.
Anything from, and we've seen these, I'm incontinent and I wear diapers, was one excuse. I immediately excused that person.
And that's actually a real one that you saw on one of the juror summons forms.
Yes.
And what are some of the other excuses that people typically give that would get them out of it?
Oh, fibromyalgia, severe back injuries where they cannot sit for long periods of time and listen to the evidence. Language issues, they do not understand English.
And as it stands right now, if you send in your jury summons and you have an excuse checked off, what happens? Do you get a response from jury services or not?
Well, unfortunately, this is one of the errors that must be corrected, and I'm working to correct that as part of the jury management committee. The form itself indicates that if you do not hear back from us, if you request an excusal, then you're excused. And I think, unfortunately, that the government has made some errors in that regard, and there should be some form of either electronic, i.e. email, or some indication that you, John Smith, Jane Doe, are excused. And we'll change that.
And what do you plan on doing? Well, let's backtrack for a second. What was the two biggest problems that you identified in your investigation in that first month between when the jurors didn't show up and when they came back on November 4th?
Well, the primary issue was just folks who ignored the summons, did not take any action to request an excusal. You know, when I received the 287 persons that did show up on November 4, I called two people before the court. The first was an individual who had lied about military service. I dealt with him first. The second was an individual who, quite honestly, had forgotten. Mm-hmm. And I dealt with him and said, thank you for your honesty. And now, folks, you in the audience, how many of you forgot?
How many hands went up?
60 hands.
And so the majority of people just decided not to show up, not realizing how important this is.
Exactly.
And when you decided, I remember being in court with you on the October 3rd, why did you decide that it was time to take action at this particular point?
Well, because persons are being denied their constitutional right. Each of us has a right to be tried by a jury of our peers. We hear it all the time. We hear it on Law and Order. We hear it on NCIS. We hear it on these CSI programs. And yet, folks, this is real life. This is where the rubber meets the road, and men and women are facing the loss of their life and liberty. And they have a right to demand that they be judged by either 6 or 12, depending upon the case, of their peers, regardless of gender, race, national origin, ethnicity, color, creed, sexual affinity. It doesn't matter. Those men and women come together and reach a unanimous verdict. They listen to the evidence, they listen to the judge, give them the law that they, the jury, must then apply to the facts as they find them, and they reach a unanimous verdict. And for 17 years, I've been proud to serve in this process of justice with the assistance and participation of men and women from Hillsborough County who have done their duty.
Surprising I remember being in the court with you on the 4th. One of the jurors actually got up and said that he thought it was still done. You were still selected based on voter registration.
Exactly.
That changed actually in 1998. We switched to the driver's license rolls. And what is the importance of people maintaining a current address, aside from actually being a criminal offense if you don't do it?
It is a criminal offense, and most people don't realize that within 10 days of changing their address, they're required by law to contact the Department of Highway Safety and Motor Vehicles and change the address on their driver's license. And if they fail to do that, they can receive a citation, and it can result in a criminal violation.
And the people that came back on November 4th when they actually showed up, I remember riding up in the elevator with a couple of people that were visibly very nervous and didn't realize that I was going to be in there as well. But it was surprising to me that when you opened up the dialogue and you started the conversation with the people, that they actually responded fairly positively. I remember one woman got up and actually wanted to be on your committee. Did that surprise you, the reception that you got?
Well, not really, because I think most people want to do the right thing. And while many Americans, unfortunately, have an absolute distrust, and some would say a hatred of government, and while the judiciary is one branch of 3 of our government, you know, this process, it's not our system of justice in the sense that it belongs to the judges and the lawyers. It's our system of justice that belongs to each and every American, each and every Floridian, and each and every citizen of Hillsborough County. And we should embrace that process, because this is the one part of government where your voice is truly heard.
When you talked about forming this committee, what are some of the things that you are actually targeting, aside from just an electronic means of communication between the jurors and jury services? What are the things that you're looking to change in the entire process?
Well, the process itself, in the grand scheme, must be changed. We've already addressed electronic communication. I mean, everybody in this world, regardless of income, seems to have a smartphone and a laptop, perhaps a netbook, an iPhone, and some other form
something
of
else that we can use.
Exactly. So, again, contact electronically is, number 1, free, while it does take some time, reliance upon the fax machine and the paper world has to cease. And so we can do a better job in that regard. And so this committee, which will consist of judges, clerk personnel, administrative personnel, and perhaps some lay persons, because I thought that woman's suggestion was an excellent suggestion with respect to bringing in some fresh ideas. Those of you that have been through the process, how could we improve it? And as you know, having practiced before me, I ask every juror, if you have ideas on how to improve this process, then by all means, call the Chief Judge, Manuel Menendez Jr., call my office, call Laura Daniels, my judicial assistant, tell us your suggestions so that we can consider them and perhaps implement them.
And in terms of when you go to jury selection, I know that 300, 400 people could show up for jury duty on any given...
Well, we had 2,500 a week ago Monday summoned because of the 2 death penalty cases, in addition to the other trials throughout this entire circuit, with 62 judges.
2,500 people.
2,500 jurors summoned.
How many showed up?
I'm not sure. I don't have that number yet because, again...
Be interesting to see.
It will be.
When they show up for jury services and the courtrooms start pulling people for jury trials, tell us exactly what the process is in terms of when you go to the courtroom, why is there the number 22? Why is that so important?
Well, the number 22 is mandated by our Florida Rules of Criminal Procedure. And then on the civil side, it's generally 16 jurors per civil case. Obviously, there are some hot buttons, some of the tobacco trials, some of the other medical malpractice cases, for example, where people have very strong feelings one way or the other. We will summon more than the normal 16 for a civil case, obviously. In those cases, you may get 50 or 75 or even 100 jurors up in the auditorium. We have started a phase-in process for the summoning of jurors. We don't summon all 2,500 for 8 o'clock. We'll summon a portion at 8 o'clock and summon additional jurors at 10:30 as this process, again, trying to streamline the wait downstairs to get into the courthouse with our security measures and make it a little bit more user-friendly. So, we're doing what we can. We've developed a new video where we show the jurors exactly what they will be experiencing.
Step by step.
It's a lot like the military. We hurry up and we wait, but that's part of the dynamic of trial. As folks negotiate, both in the civil trials and the criminal trials, criminal defendants may at the last moment decide to plead guilty, accepting a particular sentence that has been negotiated between their lawyer, the defense lawyer, and the prosecutor, the state attorney. On the civil side, obviously, that's a dynamic and ongoing settlement process. And I always say negotiated justice in the civil world is the best justice because the parties have agreed to that particular verdict.
In the criminal realm, when people come into a courtroom, they're sitting for a criminal trial, they're not told beforehand what the trial is about or even what the nature of the charge is.
No. But generally, they may see on the door criminal division of the circuit court. So they know generally one side of the street is criminal, the other side of the street is civil.
Now, in terms of a criminal trial, if they get involved in a criminal case, this question I've been asked tons of times already, but the typical case does not take 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 weeks like we've seen, Casey Anthony, Michael Jackson, all these other trials.
We are very efficient in our circuit. We have good judges. These 62 men and women, I'm honored to serve with each and every one of them. We try the majority of our felonies in a maximum of 2 to 3 days. Maximum. And that's with 1 day of jury selection. Most cases are 2 days. The felony or the capital murder cases that are being tried by Judge Battles and Judge Fuente will take a total 1 week for jury selection, 2 weeks for trial, 3 weeks to try a death penalty case.
And so that's what a lot of people don't understand is that this process, we actually have thought out our case where everything's very streamlined. We know the facts of our case. We know what witnesses we're going to call. And talk about sequestration. Have you ever sequestered a jury?
Never. The state of Florida and Hillsborough County can't afford sequestration because if we sequester a jury, I have to pay for their hotel bill, I have to pay for their food bill, and quite frankly, folks, we don't have the money. So no, I will instruct the jury not to read any newspaper articles regarding the case, not to listen to any television or radio accounts of the case, not to conduct any research of their own using electronic devices, which is an instruction that I actually give 3 times, as you know.
And that actually changed quite recently because of all the people with online access in the courthouse, people blogging,
We
newspapers.
had jurors blogging during the trial itself, which is absolutely absurd.
And that instant access of for example, if you're sitting on a jury and you're on a break and you check your PDA or your iPhone and you get instant news alerts. I had the situation where I've been sitting in trial and people are texting me saying, "Oh, hey, I heard you broke for lunch," and I'm like, well, "How did you know that?" And there's a newspaper reporter sitting behind me blogging about it, and so that was really, I think, one of the biggest changes I've seen in jury selection and also the jury instructions since I've been a prosecutor. That the introduction and mainstreaming of electronic devices.
It's extremely important because, as you know, that defendant, that man or woman charged with a crime, has the right to confront the evidence against them. And clearly, if jurors are researching items that are never vetted through the lawyers, through the prosecutor or through the defense lawyer, those defendants are being denied their constitutional right. And that just cannot occur. And so I instruct the jury, and I emphasize, I re-emphasize, and I re-emphasize the fact that they cannot conduct any independent investigation of their own. And I think, by and large, I have not been disappointed, and they have followed my instructions and the law.
And I know a couple other quick things that if someone comes into a jury selection process, you don't see all the witnesses. They're not introduced to the witnesses before the trial. They actually hear a witness list being read either by the prosecution or the defense, yourself. What are some of the pitfalls of people not seeing who's coming to testify?
Well, I have actually modified that instruction, and I have stated to each and every juror that the prosecutor and defense lawyer may read to you a list of names. Now, if you're like most Americans, myself included, when you hear a name, it may not ring any bells. But when you see a face, you may say, "I know that person from Starbucks." And I was at Starbucks this morning, and the governor of this state, Rick Scott, walked into Starbucks.
Really?
Exactly. And absolutely unexpected. And I had coffee with the governor this morning. But again, my point to the jury is, if, when you see these men and women as they come in to testify and are administered the oath or affirmation, you recognize them, then you, the jury, are instructed to wave your hand and tell us, "I know that person. I know them from a car wash. I know them from where I shop for food. I know them from my church," or whatever it might be, so that we can then stop the trial and ask you, will your knowledge of this individual cause you to favor either the state or the defense in this case? Because every defendant is guaranteed a fair and impartial jury.
Real quick, rush to judgment. I know a lot of us have commitments, and jurors have time commitments. When the clock starts ticking towards 5 o'clock, if they're deliberating, what do you tell them, the people listening?
I tell each and every jury that there can be no rush to judgment. And I emphasize the fact that the jury must be the verdict of each juror as well as of the jury as a whole. Those 6 men and women must agree to the verdict. And so consequently, if one person is in a hurry to get out, the other 5 will generally protect the process. And I have never seen a jury, because of lunch or dinner or time commitments, ever just say, "Here it is, here's your verdict," and we all agree to it. And I poll each and every member of the jury after the verdict is read. The clerk will read the jury. We, the jury, find as follows as to count 1, guilty or not guilty, count 2, guilty or not guilty, etc., etc. And then I say, "Ms. Freestone, my clerk, poll the members of the jury." Angela will then say, "Mr. Smith, is this your true and correct verdict? Yes or no?" "Ms. Jones, is this your true and correct verdict? Yes or no?" I commit those men and women on the record, taken down by a court reporter, that this is their verdict, and they agree with the other 5 men and women on that jury.
And that's important to do, to make sure that there's no rogue juror, or someone was pressured into voting one way or the other.
Exactly. They have to, on the record, face to face, person to person, answer that question, and they are administered an oath, and they swear or affirm that they will well and truly try the issues and render a fair and impartial verdict.
And every jury decision has to be unanimous.
Every one.
All right. And also, I remember last week when you were in court, there was the threat of some of these jurors going to jail under the statutes. That was a real possibility for them. They could face 6 months in the Hillsborough County Jail and also a $100 fine. You didn't throw anyone in jail.
I did not.
And did you plan on doing that, or was it basically I mean, I know it became a referendum, and I was really impressed by the way that the jurors responded. You actually asked them to come back and volunteer for jury service
in January.
And
everyone raised their hand.
That's fantastic.
They will be summoned.
And they're going to agree to. They've already agreed to come.
They have agreed.
Would you ever go back to voter registration to summon jurors to a jury pool?
No, as I told those 256 persons that did show up on Friday, November 4th, you know, the process was changed, as you mentioned, in 1998, and the process was changed to broaden, to make more diverse the juries, because it used to be every jury would consist of somewhat elderly white men and women.
Mm-hmm.
We now have young, old, African American, Hispanic, Anglo, males, females. I mean, we have an extremely diverse population in this county, and we now have a very diverse jury pool. And that ensures participation of all citizens, at least the opportunity to participate, and hopefully they will respond to the jury summons that are served upon them.
Well, Judge Holder, it's been great having you here. I know you've got to get back over to the courthouse to judge a trial competition. Appreciate you coming in on the docket, and valuable insight, valuable knowledge we gained from you, and also watching you last week. And I think the citizens of Hillsborough County finally realized, if they hadn't before, how important, you know, jury service is and the whole entire process is. So thanks for coming in. I appreciate it.
Thank you, Felix.
All right. And with that, we're going to turn now to our next half hour. We're approaching 5:30. You're listening live to On the Docket on WMNF Tampa 88.5 HD4 and also hawkradio.com. And as we say goodbye to Judge Holder, he's going to slip out and go back to his duties. As we mentioned at the top of the hour, there were a lot of breaking stories, a lot of trials and scandals that went on not only here in Tampa but also across the U.S. Breaking yesterday and also into this morning, the Penn State university scandal, the sex abuse scandal involving not only Joe Paterno, the head coach, who is now basically at the point where he is going to be forced to resign at the end of the season, but also we're going to talk about some of the other sports news that was going on across the state. And we'll start with Tim Owens is joining me here as well on the docket. Tim, good evening.
Good evening, Felix.
And good to have you back again. I wanted to say one thing real quick. It was such a pleasure having you last week for my first show. Glad to have you back this week. So we're going to jump right into some of the our sports news on our sports page. First off, we'll get to some of our headlines from last week, our college recap. USF, of course, played Rutgers. They lost 20-17. UF played Vanderbilt. They were victorious, 26-21. FSU played Boston College and won 38-17. And University of Miami beat Duke 49-14. Coming up this weekend, we have USF at Syracuse Friday night at 8. UF is playing South Carolina Saturday at noon. And UM and FSU are playing in-state rivalry, always good games. Saturday starting at 3:30. As we said last week, still no Florida teams are in the top 25. Over in the NFL, the Bucs played the Saints Sunday, and it was a disappointing loss for the Bucs. They fell 26-17. The Bucs are now 4-4, and we're so close to taking number one spot in the NFC South. They now fall to number 3 behind the Saints and the Falcons. Up next for the Bucs, they take on the Texans here at home Sunday at 1 p.m. And that's also the perfect segue into one of our stories tonight that we're going to talk about. We're going to get to the Penn State sex scandal in just a couple of minutes. But we wanted to talk about something that happened last Friday. There was actually legislation introduced into the Florida State Senate by Senator Mike Fasano of Newport Richey that would effectively ban the blackout from occurring anywhere in the state of Florida. That would apply to the Bucs, the Jaguars, and the Dolphins, and really any other sports team that would face such a situation. We don't really encounter it with the Rays or the Lightning as much, only because the NFL blackout rule was put in place some years ago and was specific to the NFL. We're still more than 72 hours away from kickoff this Sunday. We know that if the game is not a sellout before that critical 72-hour mark, another blackout. 2010, all 8 home games were blacked out. Tim, I don't know if you're like me, but I enjoy watching the game, going to the games when I can, but realistically, for a lot of people in our market and also across the country, going to the game is not simply realistic anymore because of the economy.
Yeah, it's not. And, you got to know that the entire thing was designed to be a financial incentive for to help the owners and the teams to make people go to the games. But we're in an economic situation now where some people simply don't have the ability. And I honestly think the blackouts are having the exact opposite effect. You're cutting out half the games that people would normally watch, and so it's hard for people to get behind their team. It's hard for people to follow the Bucks. And so then when they do think, hey, maybe we'll go to a game this weekend, you don't know that much about the team anymore because you've missed half the games because of the blackout. So it actually has a detrimental effect on the team and the profits.
And not only that, that's one of the things, but also on marketing and also selling merchandise. I know I buy my Bucks jerseys and shirts and everything, every year. We actually put this question on our On the Docket fan page at facebook.com/On the Docket. I put up a little Facebook poll earlier this week. Vince Tord responded, yes, absolutely, that the blackout should end. The NFL and the Bucks kept raising ticket prices year after year, and now the average fan can't afford to attend the games. The economy is at an all-time low, and I believe that not showing the teams on TV only hurt their presence in the Tampa area. Sasha Godwin also responded, yes, absolutely. How on earth is a team supposed to garner support if the games are blacked out at home? Even folks who can't afford to go to the games may purchase some of the team's merchandise or begin to save for season tickets. And just a couple of quick stats about this. In 2010, I actually did a story earlier this summer on Fox 13. 23 games were blacked out, and the Bucks all eight home games were blacked out, and it was their best season since 2005. They went 11-5, and out of those 11 games, 8 of them were not broadcast. It didn't make sense, as you said, because I know, and this was the blackout rule, surprisingly enough, was introduced in the 70s, as football teams were building bigger and bigger stadiums, getting 60,000 seats in stadiums. It was critical to actually fill the stands, and a lot of people, a lot of the owners went to the NFL and went to Congress, and in 1973, the blackout rule was actually passed, and that was an attempt to get people in the stadium. Now, back then, there were 26 teams. Now there's 32. You've got games on every single night of the week, Fox, CBS, Sunday Night Football, Monday Night Football. The landscape's totally changed in terms of the broadcast world.
Yeah, it absolutely has, and there's plenty of ways for people to kind of get around that if they choose to. But I was thinking about my own situation. I've been to a Bucks game pretty much at least one every year, with the exception of this year and last year, for the last 12 or 13 years. And the only thing that's really changed is the blackout. It's just, like I said, it's kind of hard to get behind the team and and kind of follow them. It's kind of like a missing episodes of whatever your favorite television show is. It's hard to get back into it, and that's what the NFL has to grasp. But there's a lot more money to be made in the overall picture and popularity of the NFL versus just regular game sales.
And also, I know with the blackout rule or the new law that Senator Fasano introduced, some of the key points of it, he was smart in not, in my opinion, not framing it as more of a citizen's complaint, but he actually created it legally by the statute. And little did I know until I read the statutes this week that sports franchises in Florida are actually created under Florida law. It's codified in statute.
Yeah, I had no idea about that either.
Yeah, and that was the interesting thing, because what he cited one of the statute numbers in his bill, and when I looked it up last night when I was getting ready for the show, it's actually governed that you have to, not only the team can come into a certain city, but it's got to meet certain qualifications, got to be certified by a league, obviously with the NFL. But this was another interesting statistic I found, that under those rules that are in place when you actually form your team in Florida, $166,667 a month goes to that team every month under a state fund that has been set up, and you can get that money for up to 30 years. That's to maintain the stadium. A lot of these stadiums are built by bonds and the city taxpayer money and stuff. But Fasano's bill would essentially wipe that out, because what he's just proposed doing is that if you make it illegal, number one, to black out the game, especially locally, since on the premise that you're taking in the city and the county's money, so you have no right to prevent the citizens of that county or that city or that franchise from viewing the game, which actually constitutionally makes sense. And he would also fine those teams $125,000 for every time that they blacked out a game. That money, good cause, it would go to foster children, nonprofit youth organizations, and also to the USO in order to buy tickets for military members to go to the games. That money would be payable, of course, before the beginning of every season. So it's going to be an interesting bill to see if it passes, and then who challenges it. If the Bucks, the Jaguars, or even the NFL themselves come down and challenge it.
I'm sure it'll probably be challenged by all of them. And there's another idea that's been floated. I'm not a big fan of big government, even though I like the idea behind what he's trying to do. An alternative idea that's been floated out there is having the owner buy up the empty seats, so to speak, and that gets rid of the blackout. And so since they kind of get to price them up to begin with, it may not be such a cost to them, and kind of gets us the net effect of having increased popularity, then increased ticket sales, increased merchandise, and may pay for itself that way.
I know the Glazers did that for a while, but then I know they have that soccer team over in the UK, and there was some controversy whether or not that was bleeding money away from the Bucks and hurting the Bucks in the end. But essentially, it got to the point, from the Glazers' perspective, from what I remember reading, that they simply couldn't afford to buy out as many tickets as they needed to get a sell, because you're talking to a stadium that can hold 68,000 people. If only 40,000 people are expected to show up, and that's actually tickets in hand that have been sold, buying another 28,000 tickets, that's kind of a big responsibility, but understandable.
Yeah, it is one of those things. When they bought the soccer franchise over in England, it was kind of the scuttlebutt that this is what was going to happen to the Bucks. They would kind of lose their way. They wouldn't get as much attention. And here we are, 3 years later, and kind of in an entirely different environment when we were talking about Tampa Bay football than we were before that. So maybe there was some truth to that before that all went down.
And even with the games not being sold out, the Bucks still performing, still going 11-5 last season. They're having a little rocky start this season. Hopefully they can pull out the rest of the season, maybe win some more games, but remains to be seen. But that's one issue that we're definitely going to keep track of here on the docket. The other big sports headline, and this was crazy how this came out, earlier this week, Penn State, huge sex abuse scandal was exposed. The Attorney General of the state of Pennsylvania released a grand jury report alleging not only Jerry Sandusky, who was the defensive coordinator at Penn State he was with the university about 32 years. He established a charity in 1977 called Second Mile, and basically used that charity to lure in underage victims, underage boys that were from underprivileged families, give them a second chance. And I read the parts of the grand jury report, and I got to say, even as a prosecutor, it was absolutely horrifying what he had done to some of the boys. There's allegations that Joe Paterno had actually witnessed one of the incidents, and that's pretty much why. But he reported it to the athletic director, which under the school's guidelines was what was required. The debate now, I think, is whether or not Paterno should have gone a little further, and some of the other people, the athletic directors involved, like Tim Curley, Gary Schultz, whether or not they covered it up. The grand jury specifically found that Curley and Schultz did make false statements to the grand jury about their involvement and what they knew at the time. It's like, and the news broke this morning that Paterno is going to be retire at the end of the season. It's just unbelievable. Like, this went on for so long, and the allegations are from, right now, as it stands, 8 boys from 1994 to 2009, and basically Sandusky he had access to the Penn State facilities and other facilities. It's just unbelievable that this went on for 15 years, and people just turned a blind eye to it.
Yeah, the whole situation is kind of mind-boggling. How it not only that it happened to begin with, but it happened for as long as it did, with so many people at least, seeing certain things that they never should have seen, and then it going nowhere. Because you talk about the process of notifying your superior, notifying the athletic director, and that's one thing. And people keep bringing up the moral aspect of it, that you should have called the police. And if you take it down to the level of just a human being, you probably should have gone over and punched him in the head the first time you saw it, and then called the cops. I mean, there's a whole lot that could be done there, much less telling somebody within the administration. I mean, I know, personally, and everything is I can't imagine not punching the guy as soon as you saw it happening from the get-go, much less not telling somebody in law enforcement about it. But who knows? It's who knows what's actually going to come out about it, but I can't imagine it's going to get any better for any of the people involved.
No, and there was actually reports last night. I was watching CNN and also on NBC that there are actually more boys they expect to come forward in the coming months, and it's going to be interesting to see how extensive this was, and given the number of young boys that Sandusky had access to. Some of the reports in the grand jury report that he had taken some of these boys to the Outback Bowl, the different bowl games, that he had special rooms for them in his house, that he was listed as a member of their family for certain events that he went to. So when he took great lengths to basically include these kids in his life, in his lifestyle, and give them what they would perceive as a normal lifestyle, and that is basically, being a prosecutor, that's the ultimate form of victimization.
Yeah, and it's just kind of numbers-wise, I think also included in that was even away games during the regular season.
Right.
So you're talking about the opportunity, so to speak, is in the hundreds when you start realizing how often that happens. And it's, you're absolutely right. Not only is it somebody in authority, but they've meticulously put in places ways for it to happen, not only once, but to continue to happen and not be caught.
Well, and over again.
For years.
15 years. And, that just... It's another story we're going to be obviously following. Paterno came out with a statement. I know a lot of people who I was talking to yesterday when the story broke, they were saying there's no way that he can't resign. The university was very adamant last night, putting out statements through the news media, also on Twitter, that they were in the process of making plans for his retirement. The story broke this morning. He issued a statement saying that he was retiring at the end of the season. He said some things that were remorseful, but one of the things that really kind of stuck out with me was a statement that he said, "With the benefit of hindsight, I wish I had done more." And that, to me, there's a concept in law called willful blindness, and that's almost what it seems like he did and some of the other athletic directors did.
Yeah, but you've seen his glasses. He might actually be blind. You really don't know.
Good point. I would hope if he saw something through those Coke bottles, that he would report it.
Not to make a joke of it, but realistically, kind of in a joking manner, when you watch Penn State football for the last few years, you kind of see Joe Paterno walking around and wonder if he even knows where he is.
Right.
So, who knows how much he knew or how much he actually comprehended what he's doing, or honestly what he's doing today. So
True.
Who knows about that part of it.
Switching gears, I know this is another issue that's come up, the Herman Cain situation. This one's another one that's blown up over the past couple of days. Again this morning. Let me just tell you, folks, I had all my scripts right on. When I sit down and write, my scripts for the show and the topics for the show, it pretty much have about 40, 50 pages of material that we go through, just in the one short hour. I actually had to rewrite a lot of stuff late this afternoon to get in everything that was changing. This was another one. Last Sunday, we're officially 1 year away from the 2012 presidential election. The latest NBC News Wall Street Journal poll had Mitt Romney and Herman Cain just about 1 percentage point apart, from 28 to 27%. Another Facebook poll that I put up that a lot of you responded to. And let me tell you, I really enjoy having this interactive discussion with everyone on Facebook as well. Even if you can't listen to the show live, it's great feedback that you're giving me. Basically, the way that I posed the question was, does Herman Cain still have the ability to stay in the race? I broke it down. Yes, voters are more concerned with other issues. 2, maybe it depends on the Republican base. Or 3, no, enough is enough. And it was almost an even split. A lot of people said voters are more concerned with other issues. A couple of comments that I got. Susan Wilshire, a good friend of mine from the University of Florida, wrote, "Morality and character are as important, if not more so, than any of the other issues, because they feed the discussions that determine the handling of all other issues. We need leaders with character." She voted no, that Cain should pull out of the race. Fred Tord wrote that it's funny that Herman Cain ran for Senate back in 2004. None of these allegations surfaced then. Someone is out to destroy Herman Cain. I think it's the left. They can't stand to think that the Republicans would vote a black man in for their presidential selection. It would destroy the party line of the Republican as racist. Republicans aren't racist. They'll vote for anyone that has the same conservative values they do. So you're seeing both sides of the spectrum coming out just in our one Facebook poll, and that led me to believe that's pretty much the thinking that's going on. But then we see this woman come out, Sharon Bialik, yesterday, came forward, Monday in New York, actually, described how Herman Cain supposedly put his hand up her skirt, and by all accounts that would constitute much more than just sexual harassment. Herman Cain in kind responded yesterday in a news conference saying that she was part of a Democratic machine who brought forward a troubled woman to make false accusations. I mean, they're all over the place on this. Karen Krausauer, who was one of the original ones from the early 90s, who made a sexual harassment claim against Herman Cain, she found it personally embarrassing. She promised to release documents regarding her own allegations and a settlement. We talked about that last week. Was it a settlement versus an agreement? Herman Cain made a big distinction about that. She wanted to call a group press conference. She called him a monster and a serial liar, and it was definitely a legal settlement, not a severance. Then, once again, when you step into this fray, be careful what you say, because then reports surfaced today that Ms. Crashar, after taking up a post at the INS after her run-in with Herman Cain, filed other formal complaints, workplace complaints, and made demands for promotions, reinstated leave, and even a fellowship at the prestigious Kennedy School of Government. She, of course, says that she doesn't remember that complaint. The press talked to people at the INS and also Department of Treasury, where she now works, and distinctly remember that complaint. So it kind of leads people to believe, like, what is the actual line of credibility between these women coming forward versus whether or not Herman Cain's telling the truth.
Yeah, not only the credibility of the women who are making the accusations, but also, the specifics of the accusation. And we have the one lady who mentioned the hand on the thigh or up the skirt or whatever she talked about, but the others are kind of, there's no details, and we're not talking about if it's a proposition to, I'll give you a promotion if you go to bed with me, or a you look nice today. And depending upon who's hearing it, one person may think it's one way and innocent, and the other person may may feel differently about it. So I think I'd need to know kind of specifics of what exactly is alleged and whether or not it truly is sexual harassment, or if it's somebody who got their feelings hurt, or what may be happening with the last lady you mentioned, somebody who figured out a key to a higher paying job and just kept trying to use it until she got shut down with it.
Right, and it's unfortunate that these sexual harassment and harassment in the workplace, unfortunately, it still goes on, and it is a horrible situation. No one wants to be placed in that situation, men or women, gay, straight, it doesn't matter. But I think it always comes to forefront in these presidential election cycles, and it's almost makes it worse when it comes out in this manner, because it kind of demeans the seriousness of such allegations.
Yeah, it absolutely does. I mean, my personal take on this is that it's absolutely, sexual harassment should not happen. It happens all the time, and it is never right. But at the same time, to bring it up and make an issue about it 10, 12 years later, if it was that big of an issue, it should have been handled when it happened, not when the news cameras are on 12 years later. And there's probably somebody in your ear, whether it be somebody like the Gloria Allred cartoon of an attorney who who's propping them up, trying to get them to say stuff in front of a microphone. I mean, if it really happened and it was an issue, then you bring it up when it happened, or you would have more people that knew about it. I believe one of the alleged victims had told 2 people about it, one of which was her boyfriend. So if it's just a little fishy, to say the best, the least about it, I should say.
Right. I mean, of course, people want to vet their candidates, and I think you got to give credit to the news media for keeping the spotlight on not only the candidates but also scrutinizing people to make these claims. So I think it's a fine line between what the media's job is, what happened in the past, and what the candidates are facing, because it is a presidential race. And Herman Cain, he's a businessman, and as we stated before, we on the docket, we don't care one way or the other how it turns out. We're here to report, and basically analyze the situation. So I think it's an interesting, issue to see the media being accused of being nitpicky versus, the public's right to know what's, in this person's past. So it's going to be interesting to see Herman Cain still strong in the polls. I know there was a Republican function over in Daytona this weekend, and a lot of people were not warming up to. As reported in the Daytona Beach News Journal, they're not warming up to Mitt Romney, and for some reason they're warming up to Herman Cain. But a couple other things I want to get to. About 5:51 right now. The abortion law in Mississippi. This was the state referendum called the Personhood Amendment, which would have effectively banned abortion. That fell last night. 55% of the voters voted resoundingly no against that. I know there was talk that they would be targeting Florida in 2012 with a similar type of amendment, and it's another hot-button issue that we'll have to watch. And that brings us to our favorite part of the show. You can't make this stuff up. The legal insanity from across the country and around the world. A couple of different stories I found this week that were interesting, and I say this every week that the 2 weeks we've been on the air, it always surprises me that in our shrinking world of social media that we have access to all these great stories that happen in our legal realm everywhere, not just in America. But in our first story, did you hear about one of the victims of Jeffrey Dahmer this week? This was an interesting one. If you remember Jeffrey Dahmer from the 1990s, right. He was a serial killer, horrific crimes that he committed. If you grew up in the 90s, you no doubt remember when that happened in Milwaukee. The murderous life of Dahmer came to light on July 22nd, actually in 1991, when a man by the name of Tracy Edwards met Dahmer and was invited back to his house. That, according to an ABC News story that I was reading earlier. Once at Dahmer's home, the situation went drastically south, as Edwards described being handcuffed by Dahmer for over 4 hours while he was pleading for his life. And I didn't remember this until I started reading. I remember how they found all the bodies and everything in the house, but I forgot about how he actually escaped from Dahmer, ran out of Dahmer's house, flagged down a police officer. They go in the house, they find the body parts of 11 men, including 4 frozen heads in Dahmer's refrigerator. There were numerous boys that were victims of Dahmer. He was eventually sent to prison and was killed by another inmate in 1994. But guess what happened to Tracy Edwards? When Mr. Edwards went public, obviously he became a national figure, was really viewed as the hero for all these people that were killed by Jeffrey Dahmer. He was spotted by officials in Mississippi on one of his TV appearances and was actually a suspect in a rape case down there back in the early 1990s. He went there, answered to the charges there. Later on, he tried to sue the city of Milwaukee along with the families of Dahmer's victims. That, of course, didn't fly. He was trying to bootstrap and get some money out of the fund that was set up. Now, Edwards faces his own murder charges in Milwaukee. Guess for what?
For what?
Him and another homeless man together. The eyewitness accounts as they are now is that Edwards actually threw a man off a Milwaukee bridge in July, and he's been charged with first-degree murder. The other man that was with him was charged with reckless endangerment. From eyewitness accounts, it was more Edwards that did the throwing of the individual. Ironically enough, if he's convicted, he's going to face 60 years in prison, and he may serve time in the same facility that Jeffrey Dahmer did when he was in prison. So another story we'll keep an eye on here on the docket. There was another story. I'm going to actually bring this up next week because we're kind of running out of time. University of Illinois is locked in a battle with the press. It was a story I saw in the New York Times over a clout list that they have. And essentially, a certain number of people are on this list, contributors, donors, prestigious members of the University of Illinois alumni or their inner circle. And basically, there was a story that was done that a lot of their children were abnormally getting accepted at a higher rate than people that would just apply from outside of the college applicant pool. So there's a huge debate going on whether or not it's freedom of the press versus protection of the student, because their names are sealed by the university. The press has been trying to get a hold of those names, and it's a battle that's been going on for some time now. So I'm going to work on that story and research a little more, bring it to you next week. So another good topic, especially for everyone listening that's either here at HCC or in the area that goes to college. Another quick story, in Kissimmee, Florida, a 17-year-old faces some serious felony charges for trying to be the next Doogie Howser. Matthew Scheit applied for a position as a billing assistant, according to documents released by the Osceola County Sheriff's Office this week, but he managed to obtain his own physician's assistant ID at Osceola Regional Medical Center. And Tim, you're tilting your head as you're listening to me read this.
Yeah, kind of like his creativity.
Yeah, well, this is what happened, which, of course, he allowed him to treat numerous patients, which is usually a bad thing if you're not a doctor or a legitimate physician's assistant. Now, I'm a huge fan of Facebook, as you all know. I love our On the Docket fan page that we have. I use Facebook all the time. But I gotta say this, I'm not a fan of the whole check-in option that they have on Facebook. I don't like to be tracked, my every move being tracked as to where I'm going and what I'm doing. Maybe Mr. Scheit should take some of my advice, and why, you may ask. He checked in on Facebook at the hospital 15 times. And according to the Sheriff's Office and Central Florida News 13 in Orlando, that was part of the story that I was reading. And if that wasn't enough for him, he posted pictures of himself posing with children, posing with patients, and guess what he was wearing? His fake ID.
Yep, vanity will get you every time.
And seriously, Mr. Scheit, if you're out there listening, which I know you're probably not, but in our Tampa market, or anyone in the Tampa market that's even thinking about doing something crazy like this, don't. If you want to lead a double life as the next Doogie Howser, don't post it all over Facebook for the Sheriff's Office to eventually see, and possibly a jury. Charges are still pending against Scheit, and another story will be following on the docket. I couldn't believe, I actually pulled up his application. They released it yesterday, and the pictures, and he's sitting there smiling as happy as can be, being a fake little Doogie Howser. And one last story I want to get to. We probably all thought about it, but simply took it out. But you probably took it out on your spouse instead when they got home, that is working late. And you may get mad at your boyfriend, girlfriend, your husband, your wife. You know, if you're a lawyer like we are, we often work late hours. I know I'm up till 1, 2 o'clock in the morning sometimes doing anything, but I don't have a significant other, but that's another story. But you may get mad at them even though they may not deserve it. Well, one Lehigh Acres woman did all that, got upset, got angry, got mad at her husband, and she went one step further. He worked at the Southwest International Airport down near Lehigh Acres, and one night, Soraya Belinge, I think I'm pronouncing that right, called the Lee County Port Authority police. That's basically the Port Authority police, according to WBBH, the NBC affiliate out of Fort Myers. After the police refused or really couldn't help her change her husband's schedule, Belinge allegedly said, "Okay, I blow up 10 planes." That's something you really want to say to the police. And as angry as you want to get, ladies and gentlemen, calling it a bomb threat to the police, or anyone else for that matter, not very smart under any circumstance.
Yeah, if anybody out there is thinking of doing that, write it down. It's not something you should ever do.
Put it in your diary, put it in a little secret box that you have, lock it away, have a glass of wine.
I do think it's kind of amazing because we see it in the courthouse all the time. People that will call 911 or call the police for the most random acts, whether it be my boyfriend, wouldn't get me a Coke out of the refrigerator, or my boyfriend works too late. I mean, they think that the police or the 911 call are their parents or something of that nature. Yeah,
and it's amazing. I mean, we see it especially in, like you said, in court, and like the people will call the police like, "Well, my son's misbehaving."
Yeah.
Well, that's really not a reason to call the police. But in any event, Miss Belange down of Lehigh Acres, she's facing charges now for making a false bomb threat, among other things. So another crazy week in the legal world that's bringing us up on 5:59 this Wednesday evening. I want to thank everyone for listening to us again on the docket. You're listening to us live on WMNF Tampa 88.5 HD4 and also on Hawk Radio. You can listen to us also on hawkradio.com and WMNF.org. Just click on the HD4 link. And a lot of people were asking me last week where they could listen to it. We've also figured out a little technical difficulty. Hopefully from last week we'll be able to post the show online on our Facebook fan page as well. And some of the stories we're going to be coming up in the next month or so. I got a couple of things lined up, and I want to get your input on them. Just Facebook me or email me. We've got a story about bullying that we're going to bring you in January with school starting again. We want to get your thoughts on that. If it's become a problem in your family, other people's families, elementary school, all the way up through high school, even college, it's a prevalent problem. It's something that we still need to talk about, not only here on the docket, but also in people's families. Also, the prescription drug crisis, it's become rampant all throughout the state of Florida. There have been numerous initiatives to curb the problem. The pill mill legislation introduced by Attorney General Pam Bondi. There's also a new bill that was introduced a couple weeks ago that I was reading about, where really stemming the effects that it has on children as well, because now, much like in the 80s and 90s, that people were being born addicted to crack cocaine and cocaine in general, now they're facing the same addiction problems as infants from pills, oxycodone, Xanax, you name it. So a couple of interesting stories that we're working on, the serious, the fun stuff. We've got it all on the docket. Like us on Facebook at facebook.com/onthedocket. Tweet me at felixveganews, and also email me at felixveganews or at felixveganews@aol.com. And that's going to do it for us. Tim, thanks for coming in again.
Thanks for having me.
And we look forward to having you listen to us next week, both here and also online. Right now, we're going to play out to Little Madonna. We'll see you next week.